2021. First on the agenda for discussion is the addendums to the employment contracts. We'll open it up at the table. We'll open it up at the table. Dave.
I was really waiting, hoping for others. Lonnie, I did not see an email. Could you, let me rephrase that. Mayor,
Yes.
I had requested some information to help understand what the demarc between a contract versus just an employee is when we have one versus the other. I was not able to ascertain that myself by looking at it and had requested some information about that. Do we have any additional information?
I did see that was addressed to Lonnie, but years ago, I was under the Williams administration. He made all the department heads as contracting.
Right, when Jim and I took our
Contract
positions
employees.
as the department heads and with Steve Hibbler at the time for police chief, Williams was the mayor at that time, and he requested that all three of us be contracted employees. That was just his recommendation.
And the council went with him, and so we,
Went as contract employees. There's nothing in, and as far as I know, there's nothing in MCA code that states we have to be that, or, you know, there's time limit, or like a city employee has that contract under an MCA code and stuff, but it was just something that was done when Jim and I were moved into our position.
Peter was as well. He was.
Oh,
Peter
Peter
was,
was-
yeah, I think all the
Peter.
department heads were.
Peter, the police chief.
Yeah.
Peter, myself, Lonnie.
And Jim and Lonnie are the remainders. Teresa.
I thought it odd that there's no reference to an increase annually based on performance review. Is that something that could be entered into the addendum, or is that such a bizarre idea?
We've been doing performance reviews. I have for the last 3 years.
Yes.
We've gone by what the contract is.
Would it be unusual for the contract to state that it could be anywhere from 1 to 3.5% based on the performance review? And the performance,
So my question then is, other employees that way as well?
or their union?
Was that discussed in their contracts? I'm just asking,
Does that-
as a broad
Yeah, no,
question.
It's a fair question.
Yeah. It's just that in this day and age, nobody's guaranteed a 3.5% increase every year without a relationship to some type of a performance rating. And so I thought that would be a good thing to add.
I can make a comment for you that that's not typical in any government employee.
Yeah.
Government being different from the rest of the
From
world.
private, yeah.
Which is not typical,
Is not typical.
which
To have performance, have
merit-based.
have a range of wage based on performance, yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, especially with state employees too. The legislature just gives a blanket rate.
And I don't know, I'm not saying whether you can or can't, but
Yeah.
at least I know in the fire service,
I
it's
think-
not typical that employees would have a performance review that could result in one being paid more than the other.
On my side of that, having the opportunity to change mayors every 2 years makes that very difficult. I mean, you could have a different mayor every 2 years.
I think without that, though, I think there's an opportunity for a relationship, even if the mayor does change. It's a much more drastic thing to have another mayor come in and just say, you're gone. I mean, if you have a performance review that states the merit and how you're valued, it wouldn't be, I mean, I would think there's more protection and security for that employee to say, hey, I've been getting, you know, what's the reason, you know? So I see some pros and cons there,
Yeah.
rather than just a flat increase every year without any type of a relationship to the merit.
Yeah,
Do they-
Jody.
Are you the first mayor that has done performance reviews, or were they done in the past? No, I believe every mayor.
They've been done
Correct.
off and on, different times, different
Yeah.
mayors did different, but no, he's been every year.
Yeah, I just think that we should put it into the contract that you at least get one annual review, just so you know how you're doing, whether or not it's based, your wages or whatever don't have to be part of that. But it would help in the future, especially with the new mayor coming in, to be able to look back and say, oh, this is a great employee, and here we're helping, we're gonna help them in these areas where they feel they need help, so that they have that file.
I'd refer, Dennison has reviewed these. Do you think that's something that could be put into that contract?
Mayor, members of city council, that could be added into the addendum. Most anything can. As of today, though, the addendum that stands before the city council doesn't include any of those provisions. Obviously, the addendum that stands before the city council is just simply extending the contract as is. I have not reviewed the underlying contract, and so I don't know if the underlying contract itself has any of those provisions in it or not already. If they do not have it, anything could be added in. And to answer the first question of that, the difference between a contract employee and just a regular employee of the city, the biggest difference and the main difference is just different provisions can be added into a contract employee as opposed to a regular city employee. They can be different, they can be specialized, they can have more pay, more increase, or less. It's just, they're different. I don't know if that helps.
Do the underlying, I understand the other people are union-based, but do the department heads give employee evaluations on a yearly basis? Okay. But would you like to have an employee evaluation to continue? I'm trying to think if it's in our personnel.
With, yeah, employee evaluations,
Somewhere it states, that we have performance evaluation for all employees, but I can't remember if it's in the personnel policy. I've seen it somewhere, there's something. We just want to give you some consistency. Right. Moving forward. And I'm fine with.
Just now, there's not a correlation between the contract, which, to Dennison's point, specifies incremental raises, which, what I'm hearing aligns with what I've heard as well, not uncommon in government jobs, where basically they're tend to be more longevity-based than meritocracy-based. And I can understand where that's beneficial for budget planning and everything else. So my understanding is reviews are still there. It just that it's not currently tied to this. And whether the council would like to change that, that's what the council gets to discuss.
Teresa?
So, Mayor, I know, Denison, you just mentioned that there are no other changes to this, addendum. Except it's asking for an extension, but looking back at the original contract, I saw that the pay increases are different, so that is also different, correct?
I apologize. That is correct. The pay increases the timeline, also changes the employee compensation, and then the timeline again.
Any more discussion at the table? Dave?
Mayor, I have a question that maybe the city attorney can address. Montana law being what it is, very protective of employee rights in general. To me, I think the conditions for exiting a contract really don't differ that much, whether there's a contract or whether it's an employee. I think there's the same burden of proof in either case. And to that extent, I would say whether there's a contract there or not probably isn't really significant, aside from the things that are spelled out in the contract. Could we get some clarification if I'm correct in that assumption, or how different is the burden of proof from one versus the other?
can I speak on that?
Sure, Jeff.
I'll tell you how this came about. I worked for the city for 22 years, whatever. every year, the new mayor, the new deal come up, and every February, they have a new meeting, and the council got to decide whether that staff person at that time was Debbie Tomasich, or Skip Boyer, or the police chief, or the public works got to keep their job. It was a vote. There was no continuity, no contract of any kind of saying, yeah, you've got your job. Every year they would vote, well, let's keep him. What happened if they, so you come up in February and say, no, we don't want you in Bushel anymore?
And we still do that today.
I know we confirm department heads, but I think my understanding is that as an employee in Montana, we couldn't just decide, using the example provided, we don't want Jim Bushnell anymore, which, by the way, for clarification purpose, for everybody who's up, has nothing to do with this
So I'm
conversation.
just telling you how this came about.
But my understanding is, even just as a standard employee under Montana law, you can't be let go without cause. There is an exception to that in municipalities, in that you could be let go because money doesn't exist, but that kind of precludes that there's not gonna be somebody else hired back into that position.
So there's some job security involved in that contract with the staff. Now, the employees are union, there's all kinds of protections for them, but in the staff, the department heads.
And I guess,
No,
my understanding, I still haven't heard an answer, is I understand the perceived job security. I'm just not sure that it's a real job security any more so than under Montana state law.
Anderson?
Mayor, members of the city council, that is a fantastic question, and I would like to review it more before giving a specific answer for the city council.
Fair answer, thank you.
I would think one of the major points would be a contract could have a clause where if a person left, they got a huge buyout. Where if an employee was terminated for cause, they would only get what was due to them. And therein lies one major difference that could separate the two terms, the two terminologies.
And to your point, we did have one contract we reviewed not long ago where it was advised by the legal counsel at that time to remove those clauses. I did not recall seeing a clause along that in here.
Which one was that?
Pardon?
Which one was that?
We had a contract with the city attorney, and Sam Painter had advised that there was a clause be removed that had a payout clause in it when it was ended. And he had advised that we remove that.
Well, irregardless, let's turn it over to the city attorney if the mayor wishes to.
Yes.
Are the contracts what is desired by the staff
These two, yes.
instead of being unionized as employees?
They can't
No,
be
it's just like-
unionized.
We can't be united.
we're not union.
So, the department heads that I've hired in the last 3.5 years have, stated that they did not want to be contracted. And I understand. I think, what we're looking at tonight and what we're discussing and what we'll be voting on is the addendum that's in front of us right now.
And I do stand corrected in looking back. Number 2 does have the 6 months clause in it. So on page 5, I'm looking at Lonnie's right now. I will state I'm looking at Lonnie's. I understand the potential values of a contract, both as the city attorney described and also even if it's only a perceived job security, I understand that also has a value. Having said that, I'm not inclined, I also don't think you wait until the last day to extend a contract, that you do that prior to, and I'm thinking of folks that I've worked in positions where there's been government and federal contracts, and there's a tendency to extend those, 1 to 3 months before they expire, just so the good folks don't go looking elsewhere because they don't have but that's generally funding based and it's gonna go away. But I'm looking primarily at Lonnie's right now because I don't see value in extending a contract that's still more than 3 months out. I think that's a conversation to have closer to that time frame. Yeah, and that's I'm looking at hers.
So Dave, are you talking about on page 5, where underneath it says termination of employment, so it's at the bottom of the page and it's number 2?
On mine, it's actually at the top of the page, it is toward the bottom, sorry. Yeah, employer and employee agree that reasonable and sufficient notice of termination, and it says other than for cause. So I think, like I said, that to me is where it compares pretty closely to what would be the burden of proof under state law, that there's 6 months. My only question on that is that the input we got on the last time when that went out to an attorney was pretty much a similar clause, and he advised that we remove that, and we actually did strike that from the contract we had with the city attorney.
So what we're looking at is the addendum now?
I'm looking at the original contract that we're extending. Oh, okay. Oh, so you're saying,
So we aren't changing the contract. What we're doing is what's in the addendum.
Right, but the addendum upholds the contract.
Correct.
Right, which Dave is saying there's a problem in the original contract on page 5, this number 2, that says termination other than for cause or at the end of a contract term by employer shall result in a compensation package of 1 year of the annual salary in addition to the outstanding accrued vacation, comp time, and sick leave employer is obligated to pay pursuant to Montana law. I think that's what he's saying is the problem.
Is there a definition of cause? Is it just Montana state law gives you that? And usually it's, you have to be written up so many times and. So that just protects her or Jim from being basically fired without cause.
which exists under Montana law, to my understanding, either way. It just doesn't have, as the city attorney described, additional provisos built into that.
So Dave, are you suggesting that we, for the city attorney, research into better wording for the existing contract before we sign it together to extend that contract?
So you're asking me for my personal opinion, so I'll offer my personal opinion. The mayor stated, and I believe he's correct in stating, that the discussion we have on the table tonight is this addendum, which extends the current contract as is. So if I listen to the mayor and I read the contract, and if I have a concern with any proviso of that contract and those special circumstances, I'm disinclined to approve an extension to a contract that has clauses in it that we've already been advised to remove from other contracts. And so what I think that means is that we would come back with an updated addendum, which would make the changes, and I think that certainly at that point, the city attorney would be involved in helping write those up. But I think that's the clarification I got in my mind as the mayor articulated. What we're doing is looking at this amendment addendum as it is, which extends the current contract as is. So since you asked my personal opinion, that's my personal thoughts.
Mayor, can I ask Denison a question
Sure.
on what you're talking about though? So in a previous contract that was done, just like Jim and I, that particular thing was already done. So it sets precedent, correct?
Mayor, members of the city council, with an addendum up to a contract, it can be changed. Any part of the original contract can be altered, amended, or changed, or not. The provision that you're specifically discussing here today concerning termination for cause, I think I would like to review it before giving a final opinion, but it sounds like the reasons why the attorney recommended taking it out is because it was redundant and added to the protections that are already in place with the employee. If they are continued in this contract with the other employees, it would continue the regular protections and it might give them a little bit more protections, but it wouldn't go the opposite way. It wouldn't give them less than what's under Montana law.
Tom?
Is there a common length of term for employees? Like, for example, Jim or Lonnie, I mean, or they just, do they overlap? And, I mean, how does it, some seem to be longer terms than others, and I'm not sure I understand why that would be.
No, and actually, I'm just going with the original time period. And if,
I think when we set up, when we did these ones, it was based on age, how long we were projected. I mean, when I started, go ahead. Usually clerks, they put in 30 years, 30 plus years. I mean, my Debbie before me, she had 32 years as a clerk. So at my age, we just extended it longer. Jim's he opted for shorter terms on his. It was kind of left up to us with the mayors, what we wanted to do.
See, I'm just wondering if there's a reason, I'm not suggesting there necessarily has to be, but I'm wondering if there should be a common, in other words, obviously, people are gonna come up with they're gonna overlap somewhat. For example, your position and Jim's position don't necessarily start or end on the same day, but it sounds to me like you both have different lengths of service. And I'm not sure I don't know why that is, or if that's just historical, or is that a good thing? Does that make it harder for?
What do you mean length of service?
In other words, let's say that I think somewhere I heard that some of these are 7 years. Okay, but not all of them, right?
In the contract term.
Yeah, is there a reason for that?
Like I said, it was when they were done, it was up to the mayor and us as employees to determine our terms.
Okay,
So,
I would
I mean,
say
it wasn't
historical.
that's historical.
Right.
it wasn't a standard.
So I would ask the city attorney to just see if that makes sense. I'm not saying that we should change anything, I'm just, we're looking down the road here. And, I don't know.
I can look into that.
I do know that historically, many years ago, it was actually 2 years, and in fact, the statute restriction on city attorneys is actually a holdover from the years when everything was 2. And talking to the city attorney in Missoula, who's probably been doing city attorney in Montana longer as anybody, the one restriction that is there by statute is just a holdover from back in the days when everything used to be 2 years.
Yeah, where I'm going with this and why I'm bringing it up is that I think it's important that, I think continuity is important, particularly where professional people, long-term people like Jim and Lonnie and so on, their service to the city overlaps the elected officials like the mayor and the council, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we need to have that length of, nobody in the town knows the services better than Jim, knows where things are. That's important. And the same is true for Lonnie. But I'm just wondering I think, in other words, when the city is trying to determine, write a contract, that people would want to have that kind of issue spelled out. I would find it difficult to take a position for 2 years. on the other hand, I wouldn't want to be locked into 25 years. So, you know what I'm saying? Here, it just seems like there should be some logic rather than saying, well, it's a holdover from the 70s or something. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're not all, none of us are going to be here in 10 years, so where does this go? So my question would be for the city attorney, is this something we should consider?
There seems to be a lot of permutations of this. Perhaps we should get a minimum and a maximum, and the ones in between from research from the county attorney. And then if there are some that are 2 years with an option, or 3 years with an option, or 4 years with an option, let's see what other towns who are successful in their administration of employees, what they're doing, and then we can choose or not choose to adjust ours accordingly. That's a suggestion.
I agree with that.
So I guess the other question is, do we just make them city employees and move with the contract? I guess that's an option.
What's the process for doing that?
Mayor, city council, that's a fantastic question. We can get back to you.
I look forward to the research. My understanding in the research that I've done is that they can just continue on as employees. And again, they are protected, to my understanding, by pretty much all the standard terms. Montana is probably the most secure state in the union in that sense. Again, so I think what happens is, as I look at these, as I compare employee versus a contract, it boils down to what are the things that a contract provides to the standard employee, whatnot. So right now, there's a set raise that's in there, and if I'm an employee, I understand where that's a good thing. I wish I had that in my job. Not this, I just know that as market goes up, some years I get a better one. Some years they say, Dave, you rocked it. You are our #1 instructor. We're not giving out raises this year. Welcome to COVID. And so, you know, the rest of the world, we do that. But again, I understand that there's a special role and need. I certainly don't want any of our city employees to feel unvalued. So the extent that if there's a contract, you know, that's one of the things that I see that's in this contract is locked in or guaranteed raises. Beyond that, like I said, the terms of determining this, getting out of this contract would basically be the same as if we said, Lonnie, you're not doing a good job, we love you, but. I use that as an example because there's no way that would happen. I didn't use Jim up. So I don't mean to make light of it. I understand that. So I'm not opposed to the idea of employees. I'm also not opposed to the idea of the contracts. I think what we need to do is just make sure that we're all in agreement of what the things we're providing by having a contract are versus by not a contract. What are those additional things we're doing under law? And like I said, we've identified 2.
Teresa,
Oh, it would be good to know too, if there's a turnover to employee versus contract employee, if there is, maintenance of overtime. Would it be an exempt employee position or hourly with? You know, there's a lot of things that have to still be spelled out either way you go, but, or if you try to change that.
we're not quite to the public part, Steve.
I'd like to have a statement. Yep. Let me tell you where I sit right now with this. If you don't renew my contract, at the end of March, I will be gone. That contract gives me security in my job. I am not gonna come here every year and have the next council or the 3 new people or everybody vote on whether you're gonna keep me. I do my job very well. I have deals over the last year telling you, but I'm just telling you, I'm not gonna fall into that employee council approval every year. I watched Skip Boyer for years. Every year, there's a meeting, you still have your job. Of course, they never did do that, but they could have. I'm not gonna be in that position. This contract is my security in whether I stay with this city or not. And if we don't renew my contract, I will leave the city in March.
Jody?
I just was gonna make a point that, actually by having this contract, it allows you to be basically fired without cause. They just have to buy the contract out. And as an employee, which, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but as an employee, they have to have cause to fire
Oh,
you.
no, if you fire me without cause of employee, I just have to get a lawyer to. And that's the difference
The
in a
Montana
contract and
law
not a
will
contract.
come after the
And
city.
there's still the legal deal about if I'm an employee and you fire me without cause, I have to go hire a lawyer. In my contract, I have an option.
And the city would lose, and the city would be paying your legal fees, is probably what would happen, so. But that's, I mean, I understand what you're saying, Jim, I really do, as far as, no one wants to go in front of a council and basically beg for their job every year.
Tom, my understanding is that the council doesn't ask Jim or Lonnie, or doesn't give them a third degree about what they've done. That's the mayor's job. Mayor is the head of the workforce here in town. The council doesn't have anything to do with it, really. I mean, yeah, turn up the overall picture, sure, but,
They used to, though.
yeah, I know. And that's what I.
And I understand Jim not wanting to go back to
Well, I
that.
certainly
100%.
understand that, but I'd like to see, I don't know, there's an awful lot goes on in the town that's like, well, that's how we used to do it, or,
Yeah.
you
We
know,
don't want to go back.
we gotta get, we're not back in the cowboy age here, we're getting, moving forward here. So let's, I don't know, I would suggest that we pass this on to the city attorney and review this at the next board as soon as possible and have it.
Any other discussion at the table? Dave?
Mayor, I have a concern. There's a movie that they did a couple years ago. There was a version of The King and I, rendition. And it's interesting because there's a spot where the king's concubine, is caught running off with her longtime, amour, and is brought before the trial. And the king determines that she's going to be flogged. And the character of Anna, stands up. Actually, the law calls for her to be beheaded. And the character of Anna jumps in and says, you can't do that, and says, no. And when it's all done, he has a conversation with her later, and he says, you realize you just tied my hands. You made it, so I have to behead her. I could have shown leniency. I could have processed that. I have a concern. Like I said, I have positive feelings and experiences and impressions of all of our city employees, including the ones we have contracts in front of us. But from my perspective, I would say I would advise to be cautious. And then granted, there's a difference between fair notice and threats. But I don't think things that are perceived by threats are helpful to the cause if I were in the shoes of the employees that are here. I think we're trying to have a very amiable conversation. We're trying to understand what is here that benefits them. That's our responsibility as council. But as I listened to the input earlier, I think I felt a little bit like the king. Don't force my hands and take away my ability to make decisions and forward, because it doesn't scale well. We cannot set a precedent that throwing a fit and making a tantrum is the way to get your done. We can't do that. It won't scale.
Dave, you have my contract in front of you?
I do.
You have a 6-month option on my contract. You have to give me a 6-month notice. That's October. This is, August, September. We put this up here before to put that up, and there's where it is. You can tell me in October that you're not renewing my contract, or you can tell me today, but there's 6 months. You have to give me notice. That's October. We put this up now at this time to make it pass through without a, here it is today or not. So you have 2 months.
Any other comments at the table? Teresa?
It sounds like we have 2 months to explore what would be best for the department employees, contracts, and or employment in front of us. With city attorney exploring options for employees versus differences that we've stated in the contract.
Any other comments from the table?
Mayor,
Yes, Kelly?
Mayor, 2 questions. So the first one being, if the vote is, or if the addendum is not approved for Lonnie tonight, then what happens to Lonnie?
I'll
That's
delete
later.
Okay.
Because that's what I'm not understanding, is like, you know, the contract right now, this, you know, it ends at the end of this month.
So the current addendum that I'm under, it does not end at the end of this year.
Okay.
So when we did this, it's just extending it, starting this year, but my current one is not done.
But you wouldn't get the 5% raise September 1st.
But I'm okay with you guys having one of them look at it and look at our options. I'm fine with
Thank you. And then the second thing, I just, since I'm relatively new to council, is a question that I don't know the answer to. And there's no way I can know everything, so, I know, shocking. But, you know, what Jim's describing about council members voting for whether or not somebody has a job, is that actual reality? Is that something that happens?
Yes, that's in the charter. So every year that has to be brought up at the first meeting of the year. So you have brand new council people, you could have 3 brand new council people and a brand new mayor that have to bring that forward to pretty much assign them as department heads for the year.
But if they have to assign them as department heads for the
Pretty
year?
much, just to reaffirm that they are the department head.
So not whether or not they have a job.
The council has to confirm it. So the mayor puts it out, says, I'm assigning Jim as the department head for public works, and council has to vote on that.
Otherwise, he would just be relegated in that situation to an employee instead of a department head. You're not necessarily, I think what Kelly's saying, you wouldn't necessarily be firing him. They just would be the
Because they
department
have a
head.
contract also, like, so, and it's
Well,
Montana.
if he has a contract, then that doesn't come up. If you're an employee department head, that's when that takes place, January 1.
Okay,
Contract just keeps continuing.
so we
So-
don't do that for Jim or Lonnie?
No.
Because they have a
Because-
contract.
Because of their contracts. So the way it usually comes up at that first meeting of the year, the police chief, James, Dennison, well, Dennison has a contract.
Oh,
Yeah, so does James and the police chief. Have to be brought forward and voted upon to continue to be the department head. It's in there. And there has been times when we've had no votes, not unanimously or to overrule. But there have been no votes before in certain parts.
And have the chief of police and James chosen not to have contracts?
Correct.
So they've chosen not.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. Teresa?
Thank you. I just wanted to remind, I don't know if Kelly, I know, and Jody, I know you weren't here earlier, but we were talking about the need and recognize the need to revise our charter. So
Most
that's something
definitely.
else that we could work on near future and possibly omit that requirement as well, even if it's an employee.
I agree, yeah. I was definitely here when we were talking about
So
taking a look at the charter.
Yeah.
There's that whole thing.
Absolutely agree. I just don't think that's, I mean, if you're doing that bad of a job, your contract wouldn't be renewed, or you'd have just cause to be let go.
Right.
It shouldn't necessarily be up to the council, a new council person, just because they don't like someone, or they've heard things, or.
Any other comments or discussion at the table on the addendum? Public comment on the addendum. Steve?
I don't know Steve Roy. I don't know the addendum per se, but in viewing the discussion, my comments are that we have to understand our purpose here. What is the purpose of what we're doing? What is the value of what we're doing? What is the value to the city of what we're doing? And what is the attraction value of those things that you're going to change? Attraction meaning those people that would consider taking the job or doing the job. Value in what you have already today, what you understand and the experience that you have today, and trying to understand the purpose of what you're doing for the city. The city, the populace are wanting the services. That's why we have a city. Why do we have a city? That's our purpose. What are we trying to get done? What are we trying to give value to those people that are the voters of this city? Okay, so I'm just paraphrasing these things so that you are thinking about these things when you're going through, because you can get at a certain level and consistently discuss at a certain level without understanding the indices that go down into what you do and what you provide. So you have to consider it all. An attorney can't necessarily do that all for you. He is going to do it by the law, and hopefully he has good, sense about what he's doing. But you have to understand who you're providing services for. The city exists for services. You are here to provide the best services that you can possibly do for the money. Your involvement is not necessarily at the level of what the mayor does, but he administers that end of it. Your budgetary approval of that is your piece of that. That's what you do. Okay, that's your effect. I'm not sure why the council is actually looking at contracts and things like that. Maybe it's my ignorance of that. But you need to take care of what you're doing. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments or discussion from the public?
Evening, Mayor. Rich Caparelli, A20 Bonner.
Rich, we're taking comments in the being physically present.
Oh, you're not allowing comments online?
No, we're not.
Oh, dang. All right. Well, thank you for that then.
Next time.
Yeah, you're lucky, Jim.
Any other comments from the public here? Okay, let's move on to ordinance 955. We have 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was a recommendation for an update to our resort tax ordinance. Just right off the bat, if you see your paper copy, I wrote 952 amended as opposed to ordinance 955. Going back to the original resort tax that was passed, we added amendments, the number of amendment every time it was amended. So we had a
First amended, second amended.
et cetera. And when we went with this version, we had the 1%, it was a new 25 years. We decided to go with a new number. So we can do either option, just put it out there. But the more I looked at it, thought about it, I thought just putting amended would be the better option. But we had the Resort Tax Review Committee met and we looked at a lot of the issues and clarifications. Jody was on that committee, Tom was on that committee, it was a committee of 5. Rich Caparelli was on it as well as Jeremy Battles and, I'm forgetting somebody. Regardless, the recommendations are before you. Most of the recommendations are really clarifications. There were some updating where there was things that are kind of obsolete, things like batteries, film, DVDs, etc. So in terms of what to tax, there were some updates to more modern goods that should be taxed and removing ones that are more dated. And then there was a fair amount of changes recommended as well to the violations and penalty section. And then it took a while to get to this day to bring it before the council because we didn't have a city attorney for a while. We needed to let our new city attorney get his feet wet a little bit, get feet under him. And he did recommend some changes to that as well. And all the changes in the document are before you and noted. If it was green, it was added. If it was red, it was removed. And then the city attorney's comments were in blue.
Discussion at the table. Teresa.
Just take the first question I come to. I was just wondering why exclude records, page, CD, videos, DVDs, video games from retail sales, and then state them again under rentals only, rentals.
Mr. Mayor, yes, so the council, that was an error and both of them should have been removed. The theory, and if you'd like just a little more background information, the theory, and Tom Kuntz and I chaired the resort tax committee, sorry for that, having those leaving those in the ordinance severely dated the ordinance. And so they were removed because they are not bought, sold, traded, or rented at this time. So,
Teresa.
Just another clarification then that dates it, or a potential change under beverages, cans and bottles may not be the wave of the future with cardboard and whatnot. Could we just say single serving beverages?
yes.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
But we actually had that discussion.
Single serving beverages, I'm trying to find it in here. I skipped around.
Under on page 5, under food items.
Thank you. So, yeah, under,
The single cans and bottles of beverage,
yeah.
so we definitely discussed that, and that would be a reasonable thing to say, single serving beverages.
Or drinks less than 2 liters.
single serving size beverages less than 2 liters except milk.
More discussion.
I will add as well, Rich Caparelli, who was on the committee, I did share actually Jody shared the ordinance with the committee, and he did have some grammar fixes, and Jody and I reviewed that before the council meeting, and we had agreed with pretty much all of his comments, and there's no substantial changes to that, but I'll get that in the next version.
Teresa.
Could there be a clarification, or is it needed on section 2-4-11, questions and interpretation? In order to provide consistency, the mayor and or his or her agent shall maintain I think what's implied is a paper record and file of written or emailed questions. Would emailed questions be considered written? Because that's a very gray territory right now. If someone is emailing, is that considered written? Or is it physically a piece of paper has to come to the office?
Our city attorney is shaking his head, yes, it is written, an email is written.
I heard a no, I saw a no, so I looked up the wrong time, so. So email, we print it, now it's in writing.
Email is written record.
Does it need to be delivered physically? Email to an address? Okay,
And that's under Montana state law.
thank you.
Any other discussion at the table? Teresa?
I just had a question under, I'm trying to find it, but, was afraid you were gonna cut me off. So under, it's not auditing, but just in general, I know there's a section on compliance with businesses. What if it's a transient business? Who's overseeing that? Who's responsible? And is that, I mean, it goes on to demonstrate how it's managed for businesses in town. What about those transient businesses?
You're talking about bonding and collection?
Yeah, it's on, I think it's on page 9,
Page
starting
9,
with
2414.
So that suffices that, what's gonna manage transient businesses?
My understanding, Tom, is that all the transient businesses still are, it's recommended they follow the same rules that every other business does, is that correct?
That's correct. There is a difference, when it comes to,
The bond.
the bond, and there,
It's a $500 cash bond
Yeah.
and a business registration of $125.
And there's a different section that has to do with business registration and zoning and that sort of stuff, but that's independent of this.
Yeah, they have their own whole set of rules.
Okay.
Teresa?
Under section 2413, Resort Tax Committee, the very first paragraph, the original says, member of the committee may be a non-resident of the city.
can I clarify that before you say it? That first paragraph should be deleted.
Okay, because then the new one
The
is.
entire first, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's an error in the draft, that entire first paragraph should be deleted. It's been replaced by the rendering, but it doesn't show it as outlined.
Teresa?
Have we settled, any questions or, I guess the guidance for e-commerce in relation to resort tax? Is there any resort tax on e-commerce conducted from town? No, so that's not even gonna be in there, that's good.
Unless someone were to, the way I would interpret it is if you bought something electronically and delivered it in town, yes, it would be subject to the tax. And I'll give an example, but you could order a pizza online and, go pick it up or have it
Because they don't
delivered.
do delivery.
If there, yeah, you have to go pick it up, because ain't nobody gonna deliver right now. That, so it really isn't a matter of how that transaction takes place, but the location of the transaction.
Do we need to add that here for any?
I don't think it changes the method, whether it's done on the phone or in person or electronically, it's still. But if it's, and this will be a question you may want to ask the attorney, but that if it's ordered online and delivered out of the city, that's not subject to tax. If you call from outside the city and have it delivered within the city or pick it up, it is subject to the tax because of where the product delivered.
I'm sorry, I have a ton of
Teresa?
questions. Whose responsibility is it to convey the requirements to collect and submit resort taxes upon the sale of the business? So section, under 2414, bonding and collection, I know a lot of this falls apart in the sale of properties on an HOA, for instance, like who's supposed to convey. Everybody knows the dealer is supposed to convey that there's a set of bylaws in it, but things fall apart. Is there something that we need to do or put in here that specifies continuity of that information or the transition.
So I will only attempt to offer this, but I'll start by saying that's really a legal question. But the reality is if I own a business and I sell a business, if I owe the resort tax, I still owe resort tax.
Right.
For the business, the purchasing agent is not necessarily responsible for the resort tax unless that's specified in the contract.
So we're leaving it up to the due diligence of the new business owner to understand the environment in which they operate.
Yes.
Well, they're gonna have to get a new business
There's-
license,
Yeah, they're subject to getting a business license and
and then the
and
city
following
staff
the
would
ordinance.
inform
And then
them.
we
Yeah.
explain it to them when they get there. Just like I do.
Yeah. Until I'm not in business here.
Teresa?
Was there a reason for reducing the delinquent taxes, the interest rate from 18% to 10%?
Yeah,
And it is,
and
so I asked there, what was the reason? And yes, there was a reason, but what was it?
Go ahead, Dennis.
And City Council, the short answer is yes, there isn't a reason, and it makes it more in line with the interest laws in the state of Montana. There's a very, very longer answer concerning the usury laws under Montana. That's 31.1.107, which currently is about 15% or 6 points above prime. And then also when you compare Montana 25.9205, which is the judgment rate, which is, it was 10% flat for a long period of time, but it recently changed. And now it's about, I think it's 3 points above prime, which is around 9% right now. And so the 10% makes it more in line with what the interest rates under Montana law should be.
Thank you for your research on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Dave?
Mayor, I would like to request, I know this is just for action, and in particular, we're doing this as PDF. When we get I'd like to request that we do get the updated version of it with the corrections that have identified, including the grammar. But now, but could we also have just a clean copy that hides all of the comments, so that we can look through and see what that looks like? So just 2 separate PDFs in there.
Yeah. Any more comments from the table? Discussion. No? Open it up to the public.
Mr. Mayor Tompkins, I have a couple of other minor changes to the time, and also asking me to stand up and say anything with 30 seconds.
Perfect plan.
Yeah, I know this worked into what you were thinking.
And
so,
time.
So I will deliver those to James. They are all grammatical or not, they're just functional.
Not substantive.
If we say they're not substantive, but, so we'll go through and remove those. And just a comment about this. There were 2 main purposes for this. The first one was when we went into this and tried to go through it, we tried to review it to make sure that it fell in line with the current business climate, to make it business friendly and to make it understandable. And I think the committee that worked on this worked very hard to do that in public meeting. And I think that we accomplished that goal in this delivery. There are some minor changes that I think we'll get you a final clean copy. And I'll work with James to make sure that happens, as well as the city attorney. The second and most significant piece of this is the creation of a new resort tax committee. And that really is a significant change to the old resort tax committee. The old resort tax committee essentially, the old ordinance, reviewed items. The concept of the new resort tax committee is as an advisory committee to the council, as well as a liaison between the public and the council when it goes to resort tax, to ensure a couple of things. To ensure that the public is informed about how the resort tax works. But when we went about the review of the original resort tax, we found that there was a lot of misinformation The public generally bought into a narrative that the resort tax had been misspent. And through our process of review, we were able to show the public that that's not what had happened. So the purpose of this new committee is to help ensure that it is not misspent, but also really, more importantly, to help communicate to the community as well as the council what the needs of the community are, and to ensure that the community understands how the resort tax works and operates and the benefits of the spending. So I apologize for pulling you slightly over time, but so we'll continue to do that and have it prepared.
Okay, we'll open the council meeting. We'll start with the pledge. Robert, you want to lead us in the pledge?
Oh, boy. Yeah, sure. All right, everybody ready?
Yep.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, officer.
Larson,
Here.
Kelly,
Here.
Keaton,
Here.
Lyman,
Here.
Ronnie, here, Westwood,
Here.
Whistler.
Minutes of July 13th.
Hey, move that we approve the minutes of the July 15th work session.
Second. Discussion. Teresa.
On the first point, union contract with large city employees, I know that, it says Whistler went through process. I know that Pete did as well. Could we ask Pete, just for the record, so that it shows, you know, we were both, really updating everybody on the process.
Are you directing that to me?
Nope.
Oh, I couldn't hear you, that's
Just
why.
talking down the table.
'Cause I wasn't able to determine what you said.
She wanted to update the minutes to reflect that both you and Teresa had worked on the contract.
Thank
And that was reported in the discussion. Did I restate that accurately?
Just item number
I
one.
can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Keaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes,
Ronnie,
Yes,
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yeah.
move to approve the minutes of the July 13th regular city council business meeting.
Second.
Discussion. More discussion? Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Keaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
yes,
Ronnie,
Yes,
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
move to approve the minutes of the July 27th meeting. Is it a work meeting? Work meeting.
I second.
Discussion. Dave.
Mayor, I'd just like to clarify for some of our new council members. You will note that I was not at the meeting on the 27th. However, we have been advised that we are able to still vote in favor of those minutes as basically an expression of confidence in the process. So if there's ever a situation where maybe we have a limited numbers here, you are not, it is not necessary for you to abstain from approving minutes just because you were not present. Do your due diligence, make sure that the information is accurate, and then affirm your confidence in the system. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other comments or discussion?
I'm gonna add in there on that roll call absent, and that we're gone. I just.
Any other discussion on the minutes? Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Keaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
yes,
Ronnie,
Yes,
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yeah.
Orange payable.
Move to, do I make a motion first?
Yes.
Move approve warrants payable in the amount of, ready for this big number? $846,948.60.
Second that.
Discussion.
The reason why it is so high is that we have started to pay Langwoods for the pool. There were two payments, for June and July. July and August, June and July, yeah. June's was $286,853.21, and July was $280,090.37. So that was really the reason why it was so much higher. And there were also some invoices in there for the remodel of the city library, which was paid out of their fund, their special fund.
Any more discussion on accounts payable? Roll call.
Kelly.
Yes.
Eden? Yes. Lyman?
Yes.
Ronnie? Yes. Westwood?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
Officer reports, Chief Schrock is on vacation. I do know he has a detailed report on the rally and the visit by the Hells Angels that he will give before the work session meeting, or at the work session meeting that we have on special events. So that'll be forthcoming. Under mayor comments, I have none tonight. We'll move on to public comments. This is a time when anyone may address the council on any topic within the city's jurisdiction, not specifically on this agenda. Public comments.
Hey, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Robin Adams. I'm the Workforce Housing Coordinator at the Red Lodge Area Community Foundation. Just wanted to introduce myself to some of the new council members, and also mainly want to introduce Eric Allen. So the foundation has a history of hosting AmeriCorps Vista members, but it's been about 5 years, and so Eric is our first one in a while. So yeah, we're getting back into it. And he's mainly here to do capacity building for the long-term rental shortage that we are experiencing. So, Eric,
hello everyone. Yeah, so my name is Eric Allen. I was actually here a couple months back with one of the AmeriCorps NCCC teams that was partnering with the foundation. Loved it so much here, I wanted to come back. And yes, I'm here, workforce housing, doing a variety of different things with the community foundation, helping them update their housing needs assessment, update the housing strategic plan, and helping coordinate volunteers for the owner-built housing program that we have with Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you, Eric. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
And don't you guys have a community event coming up soon?
We do, yeah. So we have the dedication ceremony for our owner-built housing program next Wednesday at 5:30. It's basically to cap off a year of these families building their own homes and finishing up. So they'll be able to move in.
Is that the Spires?
That is.
And what time is it?
5:30.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Public comments? Move into old business. Use of city-owned land permit, fun run.
Okay, so the update from last time is we did receive the signatures that were not in the packet the first time, but we've got them now. And it's 9 pages of signatures, so Stephen really went above and beyond. So that's, I think at the last working session, we talked about that we were ready to move this forward, and that was the only thing that was missing. So we do have the 9 signatures. So or 9 pages of signatures. Nicely done. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the city-owned property permit for the Red Lodge Area Community Foundation to utilize Red Lodge Lions Park for the fun run on Saturday, September 4th.
And second that.
Discussion at the table. Or Teresa.
I was just wondering if there has been any, among all those many, many signatures that were obtained, any considerations or recommendations for the fund run this year that might even improve it? It's hard to imagine improvement could be had, but anything that was offered.
I guess I'm looking. My name is Stephen Colton. I am the nonprofit program director at Community Foundation and the Fun Run program director. To answer your question, not that we heard. So we had sections of 4 go out and obtain signatures or let people know that we would be speaking to the city council. If there were any questions or recommendations, they'd be more than welcome to address them either here or at the Community Foundation. Being in its 18th year, things are running pretty smoothly, which is really, fortunate. It makes my job a lot easier, makes the volunteers' jobs a lot easier. I think in terms of the actual run and that part where they're going down Broadway, it's pretty seamless every year. I think our volunteers have a fine job kind of blocking off the traffic that goes down there. Not a whole lot of lingering around for hours and hours. Everything kind of goes back to the park for the afternoon. So we haven't heard anything. If there ever was any recommendations, we'd be more than happy to sit down, have a discussion, and see what we can do.
Yeah. Dave? In keeping with things right, I'd like to make sure that they work on improving the cheating.
The cheating?
I have T-shirts going back to number 2. It clearly states walk/run.
Yep.
There are all sorts of people who run the whole thing. And
We need more
really
walkers,
messes
is that what
up
you're
my-
saying?
You have to walk and you run. So I
Walk and
run
run.
down to the donut shop, get a donut, and then I walk the rest of the way.
We'll try to crack down on that this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.
Any other discussion? Discussion from the public? Roll call.
Kelly?
Yes.
Keith? Yes. Lyman?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Westwood?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
Addendums to employee contracts, for action.
I move to approve the addendums for employee contracts so that we can start discussion.
Okay.
Discussion at the table.
Based on our earlier discussion, I believe a number of us had an idea that we would take the time, have our city attorney investigate the differences between employees and contract employees. And that at this time, there are also other changes within the existing contract that could be improved, especially around the termination language. And that we'd be looking for that follow-up before approving the event. That was my take on the discussion.
So are you moving to postpone
I am moving to postpone.
to a certain date?
Needs to be a date certain. Do the first Tuesday of, let me pull up the calendar to help, of September. Or second Tuesday of September, I apologize.
The 14th.
I'm looking too far ahead. Lonnie's good at making sure we're.
Yeah, September 14th.
Did you just make a motion?
I believe I did.
I second that motion.
I can't say it all again.
Whatever you said.
Discussion on the postponement?
Question?
Yes.
In Robert's Rules of Protocol, and this is rhetorical, it's not a challenge, are we going to vote on the extension and then the amendment? Or are you amending the first motion or making a second motion? I want to make sure I understand.
I'm motioning to postpone to a date certain.
And what about Dave's motion?
That would override my motion.
We have
and
to take
therefore
care of
would
this
no
one
longer be
first,
that.
and then go back.
So your motion would not take precedent as the first vote?
Correct. Her motion would basically postpone the vote on my
Okay.
motion.
So then that motion will be brought up then on the 14th.
I just wanna make sure I don't say yes when I should say no, or don't say no when I should say yes.
Jody?
To Kelly's point earlier in the work session, do we also, at the same time that we're looking at this, do we also want to look at the city charter and the affirmation of department heads?
Two different things. The city charter will come up in 2023.
Yeah.
That's when it will come up. for-
And I think we will be having ongoing discussions on that. The deadline when we looked at that is, I believe it's like toward the end of April. If we're gonna, there were some discussions for the new folks, about language in our charter that currently requires physical presence.
Let's stay on the addendum,
Yeah,
please.
and so that
Stay on.
won't be part of this.
Okay, thank you.
I'm seconding the mayor's input.
Tom?
I'm strongly in favor of what Teresa proposed, because I think half an hour ago, we talked about this with the city attorney, that we need to have more input before we make a final decision on this.
Any more discussion on the postponement? Anything from the public? Roll call.
Kelly?
Yes.
Heaton?
Yes.
Lyman?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Westwood?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
There is no new business. Any correspondence? Dave?
Mayor, I would just like to share that I did receive an email today regarding the Beartooth Rally, and I do note that it was copied to the city clerk already to be included with the minutes. So it's sent today, so for a future meeting, you didn't drop the gun today. This was last minute.
Yeah.
Just acknowledging receipt.
Any other correspondence?
Budget meeting.
Budget meeting Thursday, 6 o'clock.
This Thursday?
Yep, and it's just another public informational meeting.
Here, right?
Here.
And that has been noticed, so if more than 3 council members show up, it'll be okay?
Mhm. Any other correspondence? Pete, number 11,
Move to adjourn?
he needs adjourned.
Hey, Jim.
Nice one.